political content plays a critical role in politics nowadays, especially in the US. And I think it commonly gets understated just how much that content plays a role in creating the polarization and extremism we see in our politics nowadays. So I wanted to do some research so I could sort of understand this better and sort of break it down, because I don't think a lot of people are talking just about how much extremism this does create. So again, although I did some research, I can't really definitively prove anything, so I don't want to go outright and say that this is the case. So this is a more opinionated piece. I want to make that clear. This is based off some research and some facts, but again, it's mostly opinionated. Now, what I'm going to be covering is how political content online has gotten out of hand, how the role of algorithms pushing this content also plays a role, and additionally, the messaging used, which is ultimately the most important part. Political content has truly gotten out of hand. And what I mean when I say that is almost all of it isn't really focusing on the ideas of the party itself and more the extremism seen in the other side. And when I realized this, or when I started thinking about it more, was the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk, which is a horrible situation. I watched a video, and I don't really want to call anybody out because I don't hate the person who said this, but I definitely disagreed with the way they said it. They were talking about that situation, and they were talking, and this person is from the right. So they said something I additionally agreed with, which was how people, they push these like narratives, right? That one side is the enemy. And then somebody ends up getting harmed for that. And in Charlie Kirk's situation, he was unfortunately killed for that. And then they walk everything back and say, whoa, no guys, killing's bad. And that's pretty obvious, right? But then what he said after that is what I disagreed with, and that's like the entire problem in itself. He said that it is now time for us, referring to the right, to fight back and win the battle of good versus evil. Which I guess kind of, foreshadows the messaging that I'm going to be talking about later. But it just goes to show that in a lot of the videos that I see, that's the type of messaging that is used. So when I say political content has gotten out of hand, I mean pretty much all of it is covering this extremism. And that pushes people towards extremism either in the direction that the content is favoring, or I guess always in that direction, right? Because if a right-wing commentator is covering left extremism, it's going to make people on the right, or not everybody who watches the video, but even one person who watches the video, it's going to solidify their ideas and make them more extreme, because they're going to see people on the left and are going to say, whoa, that's extreme. I need to fight back to protect my beliefs, right? So that pretty much makes them extreme in the opposite direction. And then obviously on the flip side, you have maybe a left commentator who's, really doing a good job spinning ideas and, I said spinning ideas, and that sounds like it's supposed to be malicious, but I'm just saying, like, talking about ideas that are extreme, that are also reinforcing people who already have extreme ideas or are getting to the point of having extreme ideas. And that's what I mean when I say that it's gotten out of hand, because pretty much all of it is doing that. And when I say all of it, I mean just what I have personally seen. I'm not saying literally everything, but a fair amount, enough of it to where it's pretty much all I see when I see political content. There's hardly any political content that favors one side while also not pushing some sort of extremism even to like one or two people. Like, they might not be intentionally doing it, but I feel like it's definitely happening. And the second thing is obviously the role of algorithms, right? Because algorithms everybody talks about, what I see often is how it will give you content that you like. And that's definitely true. Like, it's going to show you things that you would like. But the most important thing is it's going to give you things that you will engage with. And that's, at the end of the day, what the most important thing is. This is going to be a brief segment. It's pretty obvious what I'm going to be getting at. But it's just, I wanted to talk about this as well because, when you have a political belief and an algorithm can pick up that you have a political belief, it's going to do what it can to either reinforce that or outrage you in that. And with what I said before, it will always play a role in sort of developing that extremism, which, again, doesn't really help anybody. Now, this is where I want to spend the most time because I think this is the most important, and it's just how the messaging that is used is never good. And I want to touch on something I said earlier about what that commentator said, but the first part that he said of how it was constantly said about, like, the messaging that is used, this is how I'll go about it. The messaging that is used is always how this side is preventing us from achieving this thing. And that is creating this sort of battle, I guess, in people's head, because it's easy to get people on board when there's like an enemy, when you're against something. So I don't want to say all. I know I keep saying all. When I say all, if I say it again, I mean most. In all of what I've seen, because I can't definitively say that literally all of it is. But yeah, to get back to the point, it's pretty much most of it is pushing this idea that a fight is what's taking place. And then, like I said earlier, somebody gets hurt for that. Oh, like, imagine you're hearing that time and time again, over and over again, and you're already not mentally right in the head. Like, eventually it would make sense that that person in that situation would end up causing harm to somebody, because it's morally justifiable to harm somebody if you believe that that person is causing more harm or will cause more harm than you harming them, right? It's the utilitarian sort of belief that, if I stop this person, they won't cause harm to more people, so I'm doing this for the greater good. And additionally, you have other examples of, like, every time there's like real world violence, people usually think that they're in the right for doing so. And the biggest part of that is the type of messaging that is used in political content. Because at the end of the day, people won't think that way if they're not told to think that way time and time and time again. I know it sounds kind of off topic, but I always think of this scene from The Boys. I know it sounds off topic, but this guy who's just like a normal guy, and they play into that, and he keeps hearing, like, time and time again on how these like superpowered terrorists are gonna take over the US, right? And they're immigrants, so they don't look like the typical stereotypical American. So he goes to the store over and over again, and there's this guy who's not a white dude. So his brain thinks, oh, this must be an immigrant, and then because it's an immigrant, that also means it's a superpowered terrorist. So he thinks that he's doing the right thing by taking a gun and going to shoot the guy, when it was just a normal dude, right? And again, I know this was kind of off topic, but it kind of shows what I'm talking about, and how this messaging over prolonged periods of time is eventually going to lead to that real world violence. And then when that real world violence happens, everybody's all like, oh, no, we can't kill people over this. Like, you can't kill people because you disagree with them. Like, yeah, but like, why do you think that happened? Why do you think that happened? You're part of the problem. And then after you do that, you talk about how now it's our time to take revenge and win the battle of good versus evil. What are you talking about? That's not what's important here at all. Like, you're not winning by calling for revenge. Like, but that's again what I'm talking about. It's easy to imagine winning when you have something to fight against, right? So, and pretty much all messaging I see when it comes to political content is always this idea of a battle of good versus evil. And because of that battle of good versus evil, there's also always this narrative that, you know, this side is stopping us from achieving X, right? Whatever that may be, that's another thing that's commonly used. It's always, if they weren't here doing this, we could achieve this and we could make society better. And that's just, it's just not right. And I don't need to really explain that. I think I've made myself pretty clear. Again, I don't do this too often. I'm hoping to do it more. And when I say that, I'm talking about making videos. So hopefully in the future I get better at explaining my thoughts and writing things down so I can explain it better. But in the meantime, that's about all I have for that section. And the last one is just, again, to kind of summarize, this is why I believe that most political content does play a role in the extremism we see, because at the end of the day, it's all doing the same thing, right? It's all covering extreme content, which is gonna make people extreme. And when I say that, I don't mean everybody who watches it, but I mean one or two people, right? I'm not talking about, like, in an audience of millions. Like, if a political content creator is getting millions of views, you really think that one of those views is not some guy who's gonna, cause some real world issues? And that's why it's important to be careful if you're a political content creator, because if you keep telling people it's time to win the battle of good versus evil, well, that's eventually going to be a problem. And we've already seen it's a problem, as violence is already happening and it keeps happening. So that's about all I had, and I hope this didn't sound like it was too much of being all over the place, but I do have a couple more videos that are gonna come out that's kind of going over the same research that I did. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. Help me out a lot. Other than that, go have a good day.